We will now have the raising of the national flag. This will be done by Michael Gormley, grandson of Mick Gormley. We'll now have the national anthem, and I'd encourage you all to join in. Our guest speaker today is a native of North Longford, an educator, a community leader, and a passionate local historian. He's a graduate of St. Patrick's College of Education and University College Galway, where he earned a Master's in Education. He taught for 30 years before establishing a successful mortgage brokerage in Knocknacliff, County Longford. He has also contributed to local and national education through roles on the County Longford Vocational Education Committee, Athlone Institute of Technology's governing body, and the Senate of the National University of Ireland. A dedicated Gaeilgeoir, a member of the Longford Historical Society and the Breffni Historical Society, he has worked extensively to preserve the rich heritage of his local community. Testament to this was the launch of his book in 2025, Out on Our Own, a local history of the people of Longford, Leitrim and Cavan from earliest times through to the 20th century. The book was a culmination of almost a decade of research which uncovered new and revealing details about the people and places of this storied region. It covers a swath of human history, including the ancient prehistory, early Christian period, Viking and Norman invasions and colonization, not to mention the critical role the people of this region played in pursuing Irish independence. He lives in County Longford with his wife Catherine. They are proud parents of 5 and grandparents of 10. On behalf of the Clonfin Commemoration Committee, it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Mr. Benny Reid.
Ben G of Harja agus for the meal mahagat Kieran. A wheel the Horsta Comorta Clun Fin agus a green usle Golair. It's more than agus it's Matlon venture not on. Partridge Lache Gomorrah in the Dine hits and there's the Dine Dredge and shot in Loon Fin. Cade Blian Agus Cade Agus Coy Blian no hin. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here today, and I'm very conscious of the company that I am in today. Before I go on to the speeching bit, I want to acknowledge the great people and the great, for want of a better word, the great DNA that is in front of me as I speak today. You are all, in some way or other, the heirs of 21 great people who risked their lives for the independence that we enjoy today. They risked their lives on that side of the place that we are in now. It is a sacred place, and it's something that I've always admired, is the way in which the Clonfin Commemoration Committee have maintained this celebration and this commemoration each year for the last 50, I think it's about 57 years now. It is a fact of human genetics that there has only been about 60 direct parent-to-child ancestors separating any of us from the time of Christ, 2,000 years ago. And indeed, only a further 15 parents will bring us to 500 BC and to the incoming Celtic immigrants who built the 8-metre high, 10-kilometre long Duncly rampart, which runs from the Dring shore to Lough Canal and the Enne. And the Enne, of course, is named after a pre-Celtic princess, Etna. Contemporary with the Duncly, also known as the Dyke of the Black Pig, is the Corlay Oak Trackway at Cana, a 2,500-year-old timber decking which extends southeastwards into the wet peatlands of South Longford. However, if we are related at all, it would have taken 180 generations to find the clever, resourceful people who built the Aughacliff and Cleaner dolmens all of 6,000 years ago. Whatever way you look at it, Irish people's claim to the island of Ireland has been established a very long time indeed. In terms of our people, and as DNA testing has proved nowadays, little enough separates their Celtic ancestors from the members of the North Longford Flying Column's game-changing defeat of 19 battle-seasoned World War I British soldiers, all trained and armed to their teeth. Euphemistically called auxiliary police by their founding Westminster government minister Winston Churchill, and just like the 10 shilling a day lower ranked black and tans, the auxiliaries were paid £1 per day back then. But they were never seen as anything other than British soldiers, paid, as Tim Pat Coogan put it in his Ireland in the 20th century. They were given a free hand to shoot, loot and carouse as they wished. In any event, that company of British World War I veterans came to a sudden halt that second February day, 55 years ago, tomorrow. Now, tomorrow, of course, is a public holiday named after St. Bridget. The 115,000 volunteers who won independence for this republic have never been so honoured with an Independence Day all of their own. They took the risks, many paid with their lives. And as I would have it anyway, Ireland is well entitled to its own Independence Day. As we look out on our left, on the self-same Ballinee Granard Road out there, nowadays known as the R194, we can visualise that military tableau as mapped by Bernard Sexton in his 2023 book, The North Longford Flying Column, page 41. In our mind's eye, we can see Paddy Callahan trigger the landmine and the explosion that crippled the leading Crossley tender and killed its driver. And that also brought the second Crossley tender which followed to a grinding halt as all 19 auxiliaries were pitched into mortal combat with an amateur flying column as yet only 3 months old. It was the third hour of the second day of the second month of 1921. From within the ancient ring fort on Clonfin Hill to our right, just up there, and led by Sean McKeown himself, Sean Duffy, Seamus Conway, Mick Gormley, Jack Hughes, Tom Brady, John the Bun Madoodle, Paddy Finnegan, and Michael Mulligan immediately showered fusillade after fusillade down upon their enemy by the dirt road out there. To their right, and from the copse of trees, that's just over there, from the copse of to the right and from within the copse of trees, Michael Francis Reynolds, Sean Moore, Paddy Lynch, and James J. Brady pummeled the soldiers who had exited from the second Crossley seeking cover. But much closer to them were the column's marksmen, Larry Garrity and Sonny Sexton. On the far side of the road and near the top of the hill up there, on the far side of the road and near the top of the hill opposite, Pat Cook, Hugh Hurricane and Seamus Farley were stationed, and halfway downhill between them and here, you had, and still covering the first Lurry's troops were Mick Kenny, Jim Sheeran, and, as I said, Paddy Callahan. That deployment completed the pincer movement around their enemy. The gun battle lasted a couple of hours until the British surrendered. 4 British soldiers lay dead and a further 6 lay seriously wounded at the hands of some 20 poorly armed volunteers, and all led by a 28-year-old farmer blacksmith called Sean McKeown. As they were to testify later, the British survivors of Clonfin were meticulously treated by McKeown and by the Flying Column, and more in compliance with the Battlefield Conventions of Geneva, 1864, and The Hague, 1899-1907, behaviours for which the forces of the British Crown showed scant regard themselves, and especially at Selton Hill in 5 weeks afterwards. The Clonfin victory and the handling of its aftermath made the North Longford Flying Column a campaign template for the entire region, and it made the commander a national standard bearer for the strategies and ethics of guerrilla warfare. Sean McKeown was in the field, as it were, well before armed hostilities were even thought of, and when radicalism was very much frowned upon by both church and state. McKeown had to leave school at primary stage to become his father's blacksmith apprentice at 15 years of age in 1908. As his Bureau of Military History Witness Statement 1716 confirms, like many of the young people of the time, in 1909 he joined the Gaelic League, learning Irish language and Irish dancing, and despite working long hours by day in his forge, he attended Technical Instruction Committee night classes as well, learning shorthand, mathematics and commerce. Around 1914, he joined both the Irish Volunteers and Sinn Féin, and when John Redmond did a World War I Home Rule deal with the British Owen MacNeill and some 20% defected, including McKeown and many of his North Longford comrades. When Andrew McKeown died in 1913, Sean became the family breadwinner, farming and slaving at the anvil by day, studying our arms, drilling by night, and rising through the ranks of both Sinn Féin and the Volunteers all the while. He had no part in the Easter Rising, however, although Longford was well represented there by 4 women and some 12 young men. When the 1916 internees were released, Sinn Féin fell more and more under the influence of Michael Collins, Thomas Ashe, Bulmer Hobson, and Eamon de Valera. And when a South Longford by-election was called in May 1917, McKeown and what would become the hardcore of the North Longford volunteers became heavily involved in the election from his jail cell of Joe McGuinness. Sinn Féin mushroomed across the county with the help of Collins, but when Ashe was jailed for an alleged speech in Ballinallee, his hunger strike death in Brixton prison enraged the entire nation. How ironic it was that the old Clonfin ring fort up there, that had sheltered so many generations of Clonbrony farmers down the centuries, should have again been called back into service of the North Longford men once again. Sorry, I got Sorry about I'll go back on it. How ironic it was that the old Clonfin ring fort that had sheltered so many generations of Clonbrony farmers down the centuries should have again been called back into the service of the North Longford men, once again their cold February Candlemas in 1921. The story of Clonfin is well told by, among others, Sean McKeown's biographer, Padraig O'Farrell, by Bernard Sexton, by Professor Mary Coleman, and by Sean O'Sullivan. And it has been the subject of several TAFA contributions by such as the late Anne Donoghue and Sean Carty. But for first-hand accounts, the personal statements provided to the Bureau of Military History by Sonny Sexton, number 0396, Mick Heslin, 0662, Frank Davis, 0496, Seamus Conway, 0440, Michael Francis Reynolds, 0438, Seamus McKeown, WS 0436, and by Sean himself, WS 1716. They all give us an intriguing insight into one of the most celebrated battles in modern guerrilla warfare. Proceeding and following on from the Battle of Clonfin, members of the North Longford Volunteer / IRA companies engaged the RIC, the auxiliaries, the Black and Tans, and the regular British Army on over 24 events from Arva to Lanesborough. Few would deny, however, that Clonfin was their finest hour, or that it hastened the truce offered by British Prime Minister David Lloyd George, albeit with half of his British Empire and then some breathing down his neck. Canadians, Australians, Americans, and English folk, also not to mention General Smuts of South Africa, Pope Benedict XV, no relation, and Archbishop Daniel Mannix of Melbourne. Many people contend that it was the 1915 oration delivered by Padraig Pearse in Glasnevin and at the grave of O'Donovan Rossa that provided the immediate spark that went on to ignite not just the bloody revolution of the Easter following, but also to inflame a series of events which actually rendered at last, but not least, not just home rule, but a fully fledged free state for 80% of the country, including the 80% of Ireland, including Cavan, Monaghan, and Donegal, 3 counties which were actually betrayed by Carson and Lloyd George in the aftermath of the Rising. The brutal, bloody, and vengeful executions, the wholesale shelling of the inner city from the Liffey, from Trinity College, and from Grange Gorman, and the indiscriminate internment of 1,800 Irishmen, the rebellion itself, and the general imposition of martial law. All of these things led to a quite drastic revision of political opinion, especially across Southern Ireland. Among those interned in Frangoch were Arthur Griffith and Michael Collins, who appeared to have used Frangoch as something of a ready-made Sinn Féin indoctrination centre. Hundreds of internees returned home that winter, quite radicalised. Quite soon, the Irish volunteers were to number 115,000 nationally, and in County Longford to have over 2,300 volunteer recruits, apart from another 900 members of Cumann na mBan, founded in August 1914, just after the volunteer split, by Agnes Farley from Virginia and by Mary Maguire Cullum, the wife of Padraig Cullum from Cullenkill. Joe McGuinness won the South Longford by-election in 1917 and the general election in December 1918, when a landslide Sinn Féin victory returned 73 Sinn Féin, 22 Unionist, and just 6 Irish Parliamentary Party MPs. Public opinion in Ireland could scarcely have been more clearly articulated. Several Sinn Féin MPs were still in jail in the UK, and so the remainder boycotted Westminster Parliament. They established their own forum in Dublin's Mansion House in January 1919, and they called it Dáil Éireann, something which then led directly to Ireland's War of Independence. By the end of 1918, with Tom Reddington, the Longford Brigade officer commanding, County Longford had 4 battalions in the field, comprising over 20 old IRA companies with an average of 20 members apiece. The majority of those were in the north of the county, and led by such as Sean Connolly, Sean McKeown, etc. They were soon to see active service in over 24 direct engagements, only one of which we proudly celebrate here in Clonfin this afternoon. In the words of W.B. Yeats' Scotland Houlihan, we repeat, they shall be remembered forever. They shall be alive forever. They shall be speaking forever. The people shall hear them forever. Baluir Horja, Domcha Harabah Buick Jeev as up. We're going Domcha Chak and Lowach Liv and Shaw in Luanfion and you, Gurmila Mahagab.
Sorry to interrupt, folks, but just before you all disperse, as I said, we have a drone this year for the first time ever. So if we could ask you all just to come in towards the monument itself. We're just trying to get a few shots that we can later upload to the website. And thank you very much to Lizette, our coordinator, who's done a fantastic job here today. Thank you, Lizette.